Chapter 15. Recall Plan for Preventive Controls for Human Food. The Preventive Controls for Human Food regulation requires the development of a written recall plan when a hazard analysis identifies a hazard requiring a preventive control. This module reviews definitions of recall classes, required elements of a recall plan, who to notify when a recall is necessary, how to conduct effectiveness checks, and methods that can be used to dispose of affected product. Recalls are actions taken by an establishment to remove an adulterated, misbranded, or violative product from the market. In other words, a product for which FDA or a state could take legal action against the company would be subject to recall. If a company withdraws a product that does not violate food law or the product has not entered the marketplace, these situations dealing with quality issues are not usually considered recalls but may be considered a stock recovery or market withdrawal. 3 classes of recalls are defined based on the potential health effects. A Class 1 recall is the most serious and involves product that has a reasonable probability of causing serious injury, illness, or death. Class 2 recalls may cause temporary illness that typically resolves in full recovery. For Class 2 recalls, death and other serious consequences are not likely. Class 3 recalls are not likely to cause illness but are still in violation of the law. Typically, a company voluntarily conducts a product recall either on their own accord or at the request of FDA or a state. FDA has the authority to require a company to conduct a recall in Class 1 situations. A recall plan must be written and in place before an adverse event takes place to ensure that actions taken to recall a food are conducted efficiently and as soon as possible. A rapid response is especially important for Class 1 and Class 2 recalls for which public health is at risk. The written recall plan must include procedures that describe the steps to take and assign responsibility for taking those steps. Some people can be assigned to multiple tasks, but their roles should be predetermined to support a quick response. The required procedures include: 1. Direct customer notification, when required, see text box, about the food being recalled, including how to return or dispose of the affected product. 2. Public notification about any hazard presented by the food, when appropriate to protect public health. 3. Effectiveness checks to verify that the recall was carried out, and 4. Appropriate disposition of the food through reprocessing, reworking, diverting to a use that does not present a safety concern, or destroying the food. Notification of customers is required for Class 1 recalls and sometimes for Class 2 recalls when there is a threat to public health. Decisions on when notification is necessary can be determined through discussions with FDA. FDA has the authority to initiate a recall in Class I situations, but typically a company voluntarily issues the recall notice. The Preventive Controls for Human Food regulation does not specify how a facility should carry out the procedures discussed above. Common industry practices include predefined roles and responsibilities, procedures to determine if a recall is needed, contact lists for external notification of regulators, customers, and the public, lot identification descriptions, effectiveness check procedures to be used during a recall, forms to record information, and draft notices to complete in the event of a recall. A brief discussion of these elements follows. The owner, operator, or agent in charge of a facility is accountable for the safety of the food and must ensure that a recall plan is written. A recall coordinator and recall team are typically identified ahead of time. The recall coordinator generally has the following duties: directs all product recalls, directs the recall team and coordinates all actions and communications during a product recall scenario, ensures that all appropriate documentation relating to the manufacture and shipment of the affected product is collected, e.g., processing records, laboratory testing records, ingredient batch sheets, inventory reports, shipping manifests, etc., depending on the incident. Determines, e.g., from inventory management and shipping records, exact location and quantity of affected product involved in the recall. Reports the status, findings, and recommendations related to all product recall situations to senior management if they are not part of the recall team. Notifies all pertinent regulatory agencies. Maintains the establishment's written policy, recall plan, and all associated recall activities. The recall team should include all functions necessary to collect accurate and complete information. For example, production, shipping, quality assurance, sales, and administrative personnel should be considered as members of the recall team. If the firm has multiple locations, the team may include corporate team members from different departments, e.g., safety, quality assurance, distribution, etc. Each recall team member should have clearly defined roles. The recall plan should define each step of the recall process and clearly describe what needs to be done and who is responsible for carrying out the task. Knowing this ahead of time and practicing reduces confusion and helps to support an organized response. Job responsibility, who is responsible, should be clearly defined for who will initiate the recall and who will notify external customers. Clear documentation helps to define the extent of the recall. While several people may be involved in gathering different types of documents, compiling the information and data gathered ultimately should be done by one individual to ensure that a complete picture of the situation is available. Assign responsibility for each of the types of documents needed to ensure that everything is completed. When recalls occur, frequently some of the affected product is still in the company's control and some of the product is in the hands of customers or en route. In addition to notifying customers, assign responsibility and define procedures for securing inventory that is still within your control to avoid increasing the problem by inadvertently shipping product that would be subject to recall. When it is determined that a recall is necessary, notify the appropriate regulatory agencies. In addition to FDA contacts, see text box, many states have recall coordinators. It is useful to include their contact information in your recall plan. In some cases, an agency may notify you first, for example, if a foodborne illness is traced back to your product. In other cases, you may need to initiate the contact, such as if you receive several calls from consumers regarding an allergic reaction to your product and you determine that the product has an allergen that was not listed on the label. The recall plan must include procedures for notification of outside customers/consignees who received product. You should inform your customers of the type of product, quantities of affected product they received, dates product was shipped, and reason for the recall. Also tell customers to immediately put product on hold. Once information is gathered, product disposition will be determined, as well as effectiveness of the recall effort. A press release is usually used to inform the public of a recall that has a public health issue. While a detailed press release cannot be developed until an incident occurs, a recall plan can include templates that describe the information that would be inserted and should identify where to send a press release if this is necessary. FDA must approve the press release and has model press release examples available. See additional reading and chapter resources. Useful FDA websites. The Reportable Food Registry, RFR, is an electronic portal for industry to report when there is reasonable probability that a food will cause serious adverse health consequences. You must report issues that you find. The RFR is also useful for investigating information on foods that have been reported. FDA posts recall notices on their website. Model recall notices are also available, which you could use to create a draft recall notice for your recall plan. FDA provides contact information for recall coordinators on the web. Include this information in your recall plan and consider getting to know them prior to a recall situation. For example, several states have food safety task force meetings that provide access to regulatory officials in an open forum. Lots involved in a recall must be accurately identified. How this is done is dictated by how materials are tracked from incoming goods through the process and in distribution, as well as how a lot is defined. Recall efforts involve identifying specific lots that might be implicated and then tracing those products through the distribution system to ensure that all product that has not already been consumed is recovered. Specific information on how lots are identified should be easily understood by all the stakeholders that receive this information during a recall investigation. Unclear or poorly identified lots hamper the effectiveness of any recall effort and increase the amount of time and resources needed to complete the recall. It is critical that lot records are clearly identified and stored so that they are rapidly accessible in the event of a recall. Be sure to consider how rework is used in a facility. If rework from an implicated batch is used in subsequent batches, the amount of product involved in a recall can expand beyond the implicated batch. All information should be cross-checked against multiple sources and through multiple people so that the accuracy can be verified prior to initiation of the recall. Incomplete or erroneous information causes confusion and delays in transmitting information that is needed by the recovery team. It cannot be overemphasized that correct information, based on accurate records, is a critical requirement for efficient recall activities. Government agencies will review these records, and lack of organization can slow down the process. The recalling establishment must determine whether its recall is progressing satisfactorily. The firm has an obligation to conduct effectiveness checks as part of its recall process. These checks are used to verify that all affected consignees were notified about a recall and have taken appropriate action. Your recall plan should describe how you will conduct effectiveness checks during a recall. Most establishments follow up daily with consignees via phone calls or email to ensure they are progressing in locating and segregating all affected material. In some cases, on-site assistance may be necessary at consignee locations. See the example at the end of the chapter for ideas on how this might be structured. The recall plan must include procedures that describe the steps taken to determine the appropriate disposition of the recalled product. Depending upon the hazard and the food, sometimes a product can be reconditioned or reworked to eliminate the hazard. Diverting the product to another use, such as animal food production, may also be an option if it does not present a safety concern. As discussed in Chapter 3, GMPs and other prerequisite programs, if you plan to divert the product to animal food use, the food must comply with the preventive controls for animal food regulation. Plan ahead if you want to consider this option. Destruction of the food is the final option and is sometimes necessary. Procedures for product disposition need to consider both product that is in-house, and thus under the establishment's control, as well as product that is returned from customers. In some cases, you may have customers destroy product instead of returning it. Such situations could be described in your plan. In any case, a clear accounting of the amount of product available and its ultimate disposition is needed to close out a recall. It may be possible to divert product for animal food use. See the discussion on GMPs for animal food use and the preventive controls for animal food regulation. When a food safety recall occurs, reanalysis, see Chapter 13, Verification and Validation Procedures, of the Food Safety Plan is required to determine how to prevent a recurring situation. In some cases, modification of the food safety plan may be required. For example, if a new hazard is identified, then the hazard analysis should be updated to include that hazard, and preventive controls should be modified or added to ensure ongoing control. In other cases, the food safety plan may be adequate, but implementation of the plan may need to be improved through enhanced training, equipment upgrades, or other relevant corrections. In any case, the food safety team should strive to determine the root cause of the problem and act quickly to take corrective actions, as appropriate. Refer to previous chapters on process, allergen, and sanitation preventive controls, as well as on supply chain programs and record keeping for information on corrective action documentation requirements. Keep a log of all decisions made throughout the recall and maintain this as part of your recall records. This includes a summary of actions taken at the final recall review meeting. The references and resources at the end of this chapter and in Chapter 7, Resources for Food Safety Plans, provide examples and templates that can be used to construct a recall plan and associated records to support these efforts. You will also find an example recall plan at the end of this chapter and a template that provides forms and considerations to help you develop a recall plan specific to your operation. Once the recall plan is developed, it is important to periodically test the system to ensure that it will work if a recall is necessary. This is sometimes referred to a mock recall. These mock recalls typically include verifying that the information in the recall plan is current and testing the recall team to determine if they can do what needs to be done if there was a recall. Tracing products and ingredients one step forward and one step back in the supply chain is a common element of a mock recall. However, actual customers and suppliers are not typically contacted to avoid confusion. Traceability checks are an important part of a mock recall. These checks determine how long it takes to identify where a specific lot of product was sent, one step forward, and to identify the source and lot codes of all ingredients used in the production lot, one step back. In addition, it is useful to test the recall team to see if they can determine if a recall is actually necessary, if they know who and how to contact for technical help if needed, if they can create the required documentation to perform a recall. A test of the system can be performed over time, e.g., verifying contact information, but the importance of conducting trials should not be overlooked. Being prepared can save time, money, and lives. A recall plan is required when hazard analysis identifies a hazard requiring a preventive control, and it is a good idea to have one even if you do not identify such a hazard. A predefined food safety recall plan enables rapid response to remove contaminated product from the marketplace if it contains a hazard that can cause illness or injury. Your recall plan should define who to contact if a recall is necessary to minimize the impact of the recall on public health and on your business. Effectiveness checks are required when a recall occurs. Mock recalls are useful to ensure that the plan is current and that people understand their roles. A rapid and efficient response can reduce the number of illnesses and protect your business. FDA and other regulatory authorities like state officials will work with you on proper disposition of the product. Great job! You are almost finished. Make sure you check out all the chapter resources and please complete all activities and exercises. See you in Chapter 16.